All right, perfect. Well, welcome to the show. If you'd like to introduce yourself to start out, that'd be great.
Hi, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Laurie Boucher. I'm on Instagram as Baltimore Home Cook, and I am what I sort of call myself a pastrapreneur. I am an attorney turned pasta instructor and
Awesome.
passionate about all things pasta.
Great. Well, excited to talk about pasta, but first, what kind of just a quick question on what drew you to become an attorney?
Uh, that's interesting. I've always from a young age knew that I wanted to be an attorney. I don't know how I knew that.
Okay.
We don't have anyone in the family that's an attorney or anything like that, but from a very young age, I just always knew that that was going to be my path. And interestingly, I have a twin sister who, as we got older, she said, how do you just know what you want to do? And I said, I don't know. How do you not know what you want to do? So I've always just been fascinated with the law, and I practiced, got licensed in Pennsylvania and Maryland for almost 30 years.
Nice. Awesome. So, obviously, being an attorney is one thing, but then what drew you into working with pasta?
Practicing law is really interesting. There's not a lot of room for a creative outlet. I mean, there is in terms of if you're doing a case that's litigated, you have a lot of creativity in writing a brief or arguing in court. So that was really the creative part of practicing law. But all the while that I was practicing on the side, I've always just worked the other side of my brain with just painting classes, drawing classes, clay classes, taught myself how to knit, how to sew. So I've always kind of worked that other half of the brain. The pasta making really came into play probably about 5, 6 years ago. My kids were getting older. We had some family members that were just requiring a little more attention. And
Hmm.
so I had to scale back my practice. And the one thing that I found myself doing more and more was making pasta. It just was very meditative for me. And I just kind of dove deep in it. So.
All right. What was like the first pasta that excited you, or where you were just like, oh, I want to do this a lot more?
I've always made pasta, not quite to the extent I'm doing now. The I remember the first time I made a pasta that someone sort of looked at me was I made a spinach fettuccine for my now husband. That was 21 years ago. It was the first meal I ever made him, and I made it by scratch. And I just remember him looking at it like, how did you do that? How did you make it green? And you didn't get this out of a box? And I'm like, my gosh, it's the simplest thing to do. And so I think also what I like about the teaching aspect is that you can take very simple ingredients and really just make so many different things and just be so creative with it.
Yeah. So, I think a lot of people see pasta. I mean, obviously, in the food industry, I think even in the food industry, a lot of people can see pasta as a difficulty or a challenge to make really good pasta. So, but what I've seen, like from your content and kind of how you talk about pasta, it doesn't need to be necessarily this complicated process. So, what is your process like to make pasta, and what, like, in your mind, what makes pasta like so accessible to like actually be made?
Okay. Well, again, my mission is to sort of make it accessible, which is why I love teaching. So, pasta really is not that difficult if you understand a couple of things. It's really just two main ingredients, some type of flour and some type of liquid. Most people think just double O flour and eggs, but of course, the flour can be just about anything. You can use wheat flour, burnt flour, grano arso, really just about anything. And the liquid component, similarly, can be water, milk, whey, just all kinds of things. So if you look at it from that perspective, it seems pretty complicated, but it really just comes down to knowing the consistency of the dough. So if you mix the flour and the liquid together and understand what that dough is supposed to feel like, then you're 95% of the way there. So plenty of times when I teach hands on, someone will say, oh, I went online and I found this recipe and I followed it exactly, but my dough was so dry, it was crumbly, so I just tossed it. And I'm like, oh my gosh, or similarly, or alternatively, I should say, it was too wet, it was a gloppy mess. I tried to do this all egg dough and I just tossed it. So
Hmm.
had those people know that you just need to tweak your hydration, tweak your dry goods, um, they would have been successful. And of course, so many things can affect pasta making. So, you have to understand that as too. So when I give a recipe, I'm always very clear that it's really just a guide. It's a roadmap.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm making pasta and I'm down in Ocean City, Maryland, and it's 95 degrees and the humidity is off the charts, I'm going to need a lot less liquid in my pasta dough.
Yeah.
So that's sort of like just to, I try to make it very easy because I think if people can manage the dough with just eggs or water and a simple flour and they understand that consistency, it gives them the courage and the motivation to do it more.
Yeah. No, I mean that totally makes sense, and I think it's one thing to obviously be comfortable in making something, but then to be even more comfortable with it enough to go teach. When did you kind of hit a point where you're like, I actually want to start teaching people how to do this?
So, you know, I think being an attorney, part of my personality is that if I am trying to learn something, I really just dive deep into it. So I took the first few years that I was sort of scaling back my law practice and kind of ramping up what I was doing as a hobby, really for fun. Um, I just took a lot of time to learn as much as I could. And I realized that as I started my Instagram, I actually started it at the same time I started culinary school. So about
Hmm.
5 years ago, I decided, I'm going to get a little more formal education. I'm a home cook. I'm not planning to be a line cook or anything like that. And I really enjoyed the experience. But I also got a lot of confidence because they would ask me to come in to their open houses and do pasta demonstrations. And I realized that, um, maybe I know a little more than I think I do because
Mm-hmm.
you never know what you know when you're faced with people that have been doing this for 25, 30 years. I have not been a chef for 25, 30 years, and I'm kind of self-taught in the pasta world. So what happened was I was working with some colored pasta, and I just decided I'm going to design a class and just see if I can shop it somewhere and see if someone will let me teach. So the very first place that I did that with was the Baltimore Chef Shop here in Baltimore. And
Nice.
so I reached out to them and also a couple other places, and I said, I'll come in, I'll do a demo. I see you have 3-hour classes. I can do this. It's no one else is doing this type of class, which I call pasta textile. So I was trying to find something that's not just basic pasta.
Mm-hmm.
So I started with the pasta textiles, naturally coloring pasta dough, and they loved it. So the rest is kind of history. So I teach that class there. I was teaching also at the Kitchen Studio Cooking School. A lot of this went online during COVID. I was asked to teach down at the Pandola Learning Center, which is in Little Italy. And then I also do a lot of just private workshops and things like that. So that's how I got into teaching. I mean, I was petrified the first time I walked in to teach. I just, my husband said, just do what you do now. You do this every single day, listening to music. You don't really think about it. You could do it in your sleep. And, but I just remember that very first class, just getting to the end of it and people were successful and actually made pasta and it looked really cool and they were very excited. So that's how I started teaching. And then I added in a couple different classes. So I also do the Southern hand forming pasta now, which is a really popular class because you don't need eggs or any kind of fancy tools or machines.
Mm-hmm.
So that's actually a class everyone loves to take.
That's awesome. Yeah, no, I think it's
Yeah.
so cool that that's what I love about the food industry. Like you coming into the food industry and having your own impact in regards to learning a very niche, I guess, product, and then going out and like teaching it. I think it's cool that food is able to be affected in different ways in different people's lives. Like you said, like maybe you didn't have like the experience of being a cook, but you still, dedicated yourself to learning. You dedicated yourself to, honoring pasta and then going out and teaching it elsewhere. I think that's like a really cool story.
Oh, thanks. And I mean, I do recognize that pasta is one of those things. It's very steeped in tradition.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a big respect for tradition. I like to understand, I have the Encyclopedia of Pasta. Most people that are sort of pasta nerds have an entire library of pasta books, but that's one of them that's great because it gives you a lot of the history. So early on, I remember when I would do something a little off the traditional path, I would sometimes get a little some comments, this isn't traditional. But again, it's going back to what I was saying in the beginning. I have this other half of my brain that just needs to go out of the box and do something creative. And I think there's just room for all of it. I mean,
Yeah.
I have taught myself how to make traditional shapes, but I've also learned how to make lesser known shapes and come up with my own shapes, just using principles of origami. So, I mean, why not? It's just a great medium to have fun and play with, and why can't it be fun? you know?
Yeah. Yeah, no, I totally agree. And so you were talking about the semolina flour. I know that's a component you use. Is there a specific semolina flour you use or that you kind of go for?
It depends. So when people ask me flour questions, I always say it depends. The rule of thumb for me is if I'm making a northern style pasta, more egg based, I will use probably a double O flour, or I will use a finer ground semolina, which is called the semola rimicinata. It's the same properties as the coarse ground semolina, but it's refined. So it's almost like a pastry flour, but it still has the strength and the protein in it. And that's actually my favorite flour to use. So even if I'm making a stuffed pasta or something from the northern style, I will usually add a little bit, maybe 25% of the finer ground semolina in with my soft wheat or double O flour. If I am making hand shaping, I 95% of the time always will use a semolina, either the coarse ground or the finer semolina, because again, it's easier to hand knead. So when I teach that class to students, I'm actually doing a series up in Fenwick starting this fall. I'm just using semolina rimicinata
Okay.
because it is easier to hand knead. And when I teach people, I feel it's really important to teach them how to hand knead because not everyone has a stand mixer or a food processor, which is most of what I use when I'm at home, just making it for family, or my wrist would be shot. so, yeah, so pretty much it depends on what I'm making and whether I'm going to be sheeting it out or rolling it out into long strands, or if I'm just going to make those tiny little textured shapes that I really want to maintain their structure and integrity. So when it cooks, it still has that beautiful texture on it.
Hmm.
Does that answer?
Yeah, no, definitely it does.
Okay. It's all about the protein content of the flour. I've used bread flour before to make pasta. So,
Really.
and all purpose. I mean, you don't need any fancy flour. All purpose works just
Hmm.
fine. Even for the hand shaping that I was just talking about, you could just mix a little bit of all purpose and bread flour. So you don't need to go buy all this fancy stuff. It's totally not necessary to be successful with pasta.
Yeah, no, I mean, I use all-purpose a good amount when I'm at home. When I have semolina, obviously I'll use it, but sometimes I'm just like, I have all-purpose and I know how to make it work, so it works out. But the hand shaping, what I think hand shaping pasta, like you said, is accessible because I think when people think of pasta, like I think there first off is a lack of education on how pasta is made in regards to. I don't think a lot of people realize that like a lot of shapes are extruded. So
Hmm.
then there's like obviously the idea of a spaghetti or something that needs to be rolled out into sheets. But hand shapes are very accessible to new people and that want to learn pasta. So what what do you enjoy about hand shapes? What are some shapes that you like teach others?
Oh gosh. I love hand shaping because to me, you know, number one, the accessibility. So I do have a little bit of an addiction to pasta tools. It's a little crazy. I love a great wooden textured tool, fancy cutters. I mean, I that's another story about my Etsy shop where I actually made them accessible here. These Sardinian brass cutters, whole nother story. But for hand shaping, what I think I sort of have become known for is you don't need to have any fancy tools to make textured pasta. So when I started teaching this class, my mission was to find common household tools that people wouldn't even think of, but they probably have in their kitchen drawer that they could use to make really cool looking textured shapes.
Hmm.
Um, some you don't even need any tools, but I didn't want anything fancy. I will sometimes bring some of those fancy tools there, but they don't need them. And I don't want to teach like that because I don't want people to think, oh, I need to get this board from China if I'm, going to make what Laurie just did. So the shapes that I teach when I do my general hand forming pasta class is a cavatelli,
Mm-hmm.
malloratus, which is a textured, small, like a nubby sort of cavatelli from Sardinia, Lorigita, which is a little more complicated, but people can manage it. Capunti, which looks like an empty pea pod. I mean, I've got a list of about 15 to 20 shapes, but I have 5 core shapes. And then depending on people's interest, which they always seem to be interested, I'll just show them different ways to do different things. So I will show them how to do an orchetti, but then I'll show them 2 or 3 different ways to not only shape it with ease, but also to add maybe a cute texture at the top or something like that. So it's just endless. Even when I teach, it's funny, when I was doing this virtually over COVID, while our dough was resting, I would bring out this tray and show them all the different things that I was going to be using. And
Mm-hmm.
immediately people would disappear from the screen and I could hear drawers opening and they would come. Does this work? Does that work? I'm like, it all works. Let's try it. Why not?
Yeah,
So that's really fun.
that's awesome. Yeah, I think it's super cool. Was it? How was it during COVID to like do it remotely? Because I've never actually taken a remote cooking class. I have training where I went to culinary school. I mean, I like watch videos. Like for example, I watch like videos to learn new pasta shapes more so than like a live cooking class, just because hours of work and you know
Right.
this how everything plays out. But what is it? Was it how challenging was it to teach someone how to make pasta over like a call like this right now?
Right. It wasn't that challenging, to be honest. I mean, I come from a position of you're going to get to the end of this successfully. And I don't think I really had anyone that ever was not able to make their dough. So we
Mm-hmm.
made the dough. And I would say the biggest complication was, I could have someone hold their dough up to the screen and I could pretty much from that tell if it was too dry and tell them how to fix it. Um, but it wasn't that difficult to do it. I would keep the classes small. When I would teach for the schools, um, they would control the chat. So if anyone had questions, but I always wanted people to be on and able to ask questions and keep it completely interactive. And again, a lot of the shapes are not that complicated. In fact, when I would show them the shapes or send them an email saying, we're going to learn these,
Mm-hmm.
people would get on and say, oh my God, like I'm never going to do this. I'm like, you will. And you'll probably laugh when you see how simple it is, you know?
Yeah.
Um, so it was fine, but it's much better to be able to do it in person. So, you can touch it, you can feel it, but most people got through it. Now, doing something like with an egg-based dough, I personally think that would be tougher. So I didn't do that. I didn't want to, promise I could deliver something when I think that's just a little more technical.
Yeah.
So I just kept it simple with just semolina, water, good to go.
Awesome. Yeah, no, it sounds good. And so, you know, going back to kind of what you said earlier about Southern Italian pasta, what drew you to Southern Italian pasta?
Well, probably first and foremost, most of my family is from Sicily. I'm third generation. And I like the simplicity of it. I like the fact that they just took very simple things. They didn't have eggs, they used water and flour. And from that, fed their families.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of shapes where they would use leftover bread. So, like a lot of people over COVID, I went to the sourdough and the starter, and I discovered that there's actually a lot of pasta that is made using that. I think I just like the simplicity of it. And of course, there's ways to, level that up. So a lot of times when I do the class in person, I will show people how to naturally color their southern pasta dough to make it appear egg rich. And that's simply by adding some steeped saffron water to your dough instead of just plain water. So, I mean, it's really that simple. And I think I just posted something today using a saffron dough, and it's such a vivid yellow. And back then, I guess saffron must not have been too expensive like it is now. But all you need is a little pinch, and it takes something that's going to seem pretty pale and yellow to something really vibrant.
Yeah, I'm going to look it up while we're chatting because your Instagram is great. And
Oh, thank you.
yeah, I mean, the photos too, like obviously like making the pasta and making it look beautiful in person is one thing, but you do a really good job of also documenting and taking high quality photos. And like I said, and like she said, it's Baltimore Home Cook is the Instagram, so definitely go check it out if you love pasta. Uh, yeah, I mean, what what made you want to really start like taking these high quality photos of your food?
I appreciate you saying that, but I'm just using my iPhone. I have an iPhone 7.
Okay.
It's, I try to get the good light in the afternoon, but
Hmm.
it's a lot of trial and error. When I look back at my photos when I first started, I mean, I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I posted that. But again, it's just organic. I don't really do a lot of things again, it's been an organic growth for me. I'm thrilled when I can teach someone something or they appreciate something or they leave a nice comment, but it's not like I have this huge, huge following. I just feel like for me, it's about being able to take a skill that I spent a lot of time learning and making it accessible. So
Yeah.
that's what's important for me. And having a nice photo definitely helps. So,
Fair enough. I in researching this podcast and like knowing you were an attorney and obviously knowing that you're doing this pasta thing now, I think like you were saying you always knew that you wanted to be an attorney. But it seems
mhm.
pasta kind of was this theme in your life, and then it kind of came over the last 5 years to something that you're very passionate about and putting a lot of like effort into. Do you find that you like? Would you say like pasta is something you're more passionate about, or like do you see pasta as like this thing that you were like always wanting to do but you never did, or like how does that relate to like was it a surprise I guess to see how passionate you
uh,
became about it?
it was a little surprise because when I was practicing law, I mean, I was very busy. I have two
Mm-hmm.
kids that are now off at college, and there wasn't a lot of time to really spend like an entire morning doing something. So like I said, 4 or 5 years ago, when circumstances were changing and family dynamics, and I needed to be more available for parents that needed some help, I just found that when I wanted to relax, I would either be outside, you know, walking or making pasta, and it's just a zen for me. It's just almost like yoga.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it's such a nice medium because you make it, you eat it, you get to do it again, and it's also it's my way, I guess, of expressing myself to people because I realized that my clients, when I was practicing law, they appreciate what I do, but it's a different appreciation when you're actually giving something to someone that you've created with your own two hands. So I made a lot of pasta over COVID and just gave it away. I mean, it was like a pasta factory in here for about 6 to 8 weeks. It was crazy, but that got me through that initial stage of COVID.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, it was a surprise at how quickly I just said, why don't I try this? Why don't I try that? I have time, and people would eat it, and I get to start it over again. It's not like the sip and paint classes where you go and you create a canvas, and before you know it, you've got all this stuff in your house. I'm kind of a minimalist, so if I can make something, give it away, or consume it and start again, it's like ideal for me.
Yeah, that's funny you said that because I actually started COVID the same way where I was learning shapes or just making shapes. Like I made like arganelli or just like annulotti stuff like that. So it was cool. It was like my first COVID project.
Oh,
So
great.
yeah. I had made it all before, but just refocusing on it, and like for me too, I don't make pasta obviously as much as you do, but for friends of mine who know, like pasta is definitely like my favorite thing to cook, and it's a big reason why I wanted to have you on the show. Is I love pasta as well. I think there's just something about making it that's so it's always for me. It's this might sound like childish, but it's just so cool to like see pasta, and it's cool to be able to make pasta. In my opinion, like I just love like or any type of noodle, like ramen. I love ramen. I love any
Oh, I
pasta
love all the
dish.
noodles
Yeah.
too. I mean, I will do a lot of filled pasta shapes, as you know from, say, my Instagram. I will use a lot of the forming techniques for dumplings in pasta.
Yeah.
So, again, I always laugh because I have to very specifically label what's in my freezer because my kids may see something that looks like an Asian dumpling, which I love to make as well, but it's a pasta. It's filled with ricotta cheese, but it's just fun. I mean, and it's not childish. I think both of my classes I teach to kids as well. So
Yeah.
they love it. It's like playing with your food. What's not
Hmm.
fun about that?
Yeah, and it's just like people love it. Like people love pasta or noodles in general. Have you ever tried to make like a ramen noodle?
Oh yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
oh yeah,
I
oh yeah. I've got a flower cabinet that would probably scare you, but I love all things noodles. So if I if I can make it, if I can figure it out, I love it. I love Asian food. So I love ramen. I like pho. I mean, I love all that. So you have to be able to make those noodles if you want to eat it at home.
Yeah, no, that's totally cool. I think that's another. Well, I guess before we leave the ramen conversation, I made ramen. I have the Ivan Ramen cookbook. By
Uh-huh.
Ivan Orkin. I think he's a really cool chef. But I made his ramen like that. And it literally took me an entire day to make that
Yeah.
ramen. Like the noodles, the broth, like little, and like 2 days before that, going to um, like stores or like I had an Amazon in some products, but it was cool. It was like a really cool experience. But I like what you said there about like if you want to make it at home, and I think like not a lot of people think like that. Like, and of course, I like to make stuff at home, but I also like to go out to eat. But I feel like not a lot of people are like, well, if I want ramen at home or if I want pho at home, I need to learn how to make it. It's more so like, well, I need to go out to get it. So I just think that's a cool perspective to have in general.
Well, and plus, I think nowadays there's so many different markets that are close by that you can get, the rice flour, the tapioca, like whatever it is you need. So I live right near a really nice small Asian market. And the owner there is great. So, I will go in and I'll say, this is what I want to make. What's the best type of this type of flour? Because there
Hmm.
might be five different brands. I don't know all the different brands of the tapioca flour. So she will be a good guide. H Mart, I don't know if you live near an H Mart. I mean, I love that
Yeah,
place.
H
Have you
Mart's
been to an
awesome.
H Mart?
Yes, yeah,
Oh, well, it's like heaven going in there.
yeah.
You can just get lost for a few hours. Um, and the Eden Center, have you been to the Eden Center?
I have not.
Oh, you've got to check that out. It's amazing. It's down in Virginia. I would actually take my kids. It's about 70 miles from where I live right now, and I would take them just to go get a bowl of pho. I
That's
mean,
awesome.
it's almost like a square block of just all these different markets, and it's just like you feel like you're in a different world.
Yeah.
So, it's great.
No, that's so cool. A few more questions. So if we go back to pasta, what is like what's a common mistake you see with people when they're making pasta?
Like we talked about before, I think the biggest mistake that people can make is to slavishly follow a recipe. Every single recipe you see for pasta is different. There is no standard recipe. Now, that being said, people will say if you're making an egg dough, a standard ratio would be 100 grams of flour to one large egg.
Mm-hmm.
But again, and you know this, every egg is different.
Yeah.
So when I use an egg, I will not only crack it, but I literally, because my mom used to do this, scrape the inside to get every last bit of liquid out of it. But I have taken, and I've done this on Instagram, you can take a carton of eggs and weigh each and every one. They're all going to be different.
Yeah.
So one large egg doesn't equal one large egg. So again, the biggest mistake I think would be following a recipe. And the biggest way to be successful is just understanding that you're always going to have to tweak your hydration or your flour. So for me, what I tell people, if I need a little bit of moisture, I sparingly add it with a spray bottle. I keep a spray bottle of water, and that's what I use. Or I just wet my hands, and that's usually enough. I mean, that's
Mm-hmm.
not even a tablespoon of water when you rinse your hands, when you think about it, but that might be enough. And flour, I use a cheese grater. I just put it in something that I can sprinkle over instead of scooping it in. So
Yeah.
I will just use an empty cheese grater, fill it with whatever flour, and that's how I add it in. So, yeah, I think don't follow a recipe. Look at some things online or get an in person class. And just once you understand that, you're, like I said, 95% of the way there to
Yeah.
success.
Yeah. And I think even with shapes too, I think that's like a big thing. I think a big part of learning how to make pasta, at least in my experience, is actually like just committing to learning, like committing to doing that. Like for me, when I was learning how to make agnolotti, the first the first two attempts they look terrible, but you keep practicing and you learn. And like I think that's another big thing that is lost with something that's like pasta is you might not get it on your first try. Most a good amount of shapes you will, but some shapes do
Mhm.
take practice. And I think that is like a weird concept for people to think that like cooking something might take practice more than like the first try. So I think you know
Right.
I think that's an important aspect of it as well.
Right. And then, as you get into it, there are some tricks. Like when you talk about the agnolotti, I mean, there's literally two or three different ways to form them, whether you're piping along. you're filling in a line, or if you're dolloping it using dowels, the
Mm-hmm.
thickness and thinness of the pasta, that depends on the filling. Are you using a creamy cheese filling or something a little more substantial that you've maybe made from a leftover pork roast? So, I mean, all those things kind of come together once you do it over and over again. So, for instance, I would not sheet an agnolotti. I would not sheet it as thin as I would for a substantial filling as I would for a cheese filling. So,
Mm-hmm.
but I know that now because again, you do something the first few times, I've had them explode. I mean, I've had all kinds of nightmares, but that's how you learn, you
Yeah,
know.
yeah, definitely. I totally agree. What and I guess one of my last questions is like, what are some pasta dishes you have made recently, or that you just like really enjoy?
Oh gosh. So, um, I love making a homemade lasagna because I
Mm-hmm.
think lasagna is one of those things that you can be so creative with. Great empty the fridge meal. So I love putting together lasagnas with different types of um, doughs, whether it's a spinach dough, a vegetarian, a meat heavy. I've made lasagnas and interspersed my layers with eggplant or some other kinds of vegetables. So I really love doing lasagnas. I think that's fun. And really just learning and continuing to learn maybe some unique shapes. So most of the time I will start out with a plan if I'm hand shaping pasta, but
Mm-hmm.
then I really just like experimenting. If I have the time and I'm in the right mindset, and just sometimes I come up with something really cool. And that's sort of what happened with over COVID. I was just sort of making my own DIY tools and coming up with some really unique looking pasta, just putting some things together from home. Um, so that's fun. It's fun exploring just creating new shapes.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Great. Well, thank you for sharing all that. Now would
Sure.
be a good time if I know you have like an Etsy shop, and if you just wanted to like share kind of where people can find you, or like any upcoming events, or where
Okay.
any websites, like feel free to promote all that right now.
Oh, thank you. Well, on Instagram, I'm Baltimore Home Cook. I also have an account that's in on the Eastern Shore, Pastagal underscore OCMD. I am teaching a series of classes up at Bayside Institute, which is in Fenwick for members, but we're going to be actually teaching that class other places as well. I do have an Etsy shop, and on my Etsy shop, it's called PastaArt. And during COVID, I designed three very unique pasta boards. Two of them are two-sided. Again, it stemmed from a DIY project that I thought I'm going to make this something into an actual tool. Like, so
Mm-hmm.
that was a lot of my COVID. I also do keychains, pasta themed keychains, earrings, jewelry, um, all that I do myself. I just added a dowel kit because a lot of times people, like, I always share where I get my tools from, but I realized a lot of people just don't want to go to the home improvement store, buy all the wood, get it cut, sand it down. So I thought, I'll do it and I'll just make it available. So that's
Yeah.
been kind of fun. So yeah, so any kind of pasta tools, and I also sell the pretty unique brass cutters, the Sardinian cutters, and you should check those out. So when people get really into pasta, you know that you have a straight edged cutter or a fluted edged cutter. The Sardinian cutters are unique to Sardinia. You can't really find them anywhere here. And believe me, I tried. I actually even hired an engineer to see if I could create one, and that didn't happen. So,
Okay.
through Google Translate, not speaking a word of Italian, even though I've been there plenty of times, I now import them and I have 7 different styles and they create very unique cuts. So I use them for my pappardelle, I use it for the agnolotti, just to make it a little fancy.
Yeah.
So, and I'm thrilled to be able to do that because when I first saw them, I couldn't find anyone that would share with me where they got them. So, again, that was my big deep dive. I'm like, I'm going to get these accessible, and I sell them all over the world. I've sold them to Japan, Dubai, England, Ireland, you name it. I've sent one of those tools, so that's been kind of cool. So I'm proud of that.
That's awesome. And you're an attorney on
Why
top of
can't
all
everyone
that.
make fancy pasta?
Yeah. No, I'm
Nothing,
just.
everything doesn't have to be a secret on Instagram, and that's why I share pretty much everything because A, as an attorney, there's nothing protected about what you're sharing. If
Mm-hmm.
you're creating something and you put it out there, you can't tell people on Instagram, on social media, that you can't make that shape. Now,
Mm-hmm.
it's always polite to say you've been inspired by someone doing something, but there's nothing proprietary about what you're doing. So, I like to share what I'm doing, where I get my tools. I mean, I've had some great artisans working with me. My very first board is made by someone, Wooden Essentials. I don't know if you're familiar with him. He does a lot of pasta tools, and was just thrilled when he didn't think I was crazy. It took us 6 months to get this together, but I was just so proud when I actually had something like a tool that I designed and had made.
Mm-hmm.
So all that stuff you can find on Etsy.
Awesome. Great. Well, thank you for sharing all that. Definitely, everyone
Sure.
listening, go check it out. So,
Thank you so much.
yeah, of course. So, yeah, the way I end all my interviews are the same. So, I call the audience of this podcast, the people who follow my Instagram, the Line Cook Nation. Being the most people in the industry start out as a line cook, and then we go from there. So, as you know, as a group of people that are connected in food, front of house, back of house, you've had the opportunity to speak to all of them listening right now. What does it mean for you to be able to speak to an audience like that?
Well, I think it's great. I mean, probably most of your listeners have way more experience than I do in a traditional kitchen. Um, it's really nice when I find people that have, I don't think you need to go to culinary school, to be honest, to be a great chef.
Mm-hmm.
I have had good experiences where I've been allowed in kitchens. I've done some stages, and half the people I meet that are really talented have never been to culinary school. And it's sort of the same like with law school. It doesn't make you a lawyer, it's getting out there and doing it.
Yeah.
So when people are out there doing something and they're putting their heart and soul into it, I don't care what kind of degree you have. I just care if you can do what you're passionate about, you do it well. So it's important to me to be able to share my tiny little world here and have anyone with a lot of experience appreciate it,
Mm-hmm.
and appreciate the passion that I have, because I've put a lot of time into it. But it's humbling when a chef will actually ask me for help, and I've done that a few times. Like, I'm always thrilled. I spent a week out at Tortello, which is really a pasta restaurant out in Chicago,
Hmm.
and the owner there is from Sardinia, and we were in touch, and I said, I would love to come out. So he's like, well, you can teach us something, we'll teach you something. And I thought, oh my God, what am I going to teach these people? They're cranking out this beautiful pasta. And actually, several of the things I made were featured in the pasta cabinet, which was so thrilling for me. He sort
That's
of,
cool.
like, I think once he knew that I knew what I was doing, just kind of let me go. So,
Yeah.
um, again, these are really talented people. So I was very humbled that they actually trusted me to do something or show them. I have a lot of that imposter syndrome. I don't know if you're familiar with that
Oh yeah.
term. Yeah, so I mean, I have it a lot. What do I know? I'm not Italian. I haven't been a line cook. I haven't been in the restaurant industry other than like bartending and waiting tables through college and law school. That was the extent of it. So, um, I appreciate it. I'm always looking for opportunities. Locally, I'm always looking for opportunities. If you want to do a pasta night, a pasta event, I'm your gal. Like, I shouldn't say this, but like a lot of times I say to my husband, I would do this for free. That's how much I know I love it. You know,
Awesome. Yeah.
it's just so much fun for me. I just love it. So,
That's great. Yeah. No, it's super cool to hear. And I
so
think
if you
that's
ever want to make pasta together, I think you're down the road.
yeah. No, I'm over in Laurel, so we'll definitely have to meet up at some point, or maybe I can attend one of the classes because I know how to make certain pastas, but have nowhere near the knowledge you do, and I'm comfortable saying that. And I definitely want to learn
Oh,
more, so it'll be good.
oh, well, thank you.
Yeah, and I think imposter syndrome is. I freelance, right, and I've written a couple articles on it, but yeah, that's like the biggest thing is like not letting that dictate, what you do. Yeah, like you want to honor tradition, you want to be respectful, but then there's just a certain point where it's like I think we're thinking people care more about certain things than they actually do, and I think that's an important thing as well to be aware of.
Yeah,
So
it's tough. I was a psychology major, so it's, and I still get anxious when I teach now. And I've been teaching for so long now, but it's just it's my type A personality and wanting to make sure it works out for whoever I'm teaching, whether it's 2 people, 6 people, 20 people. I just want them to have a great experience and I want to be able to show them. So I'm always concerned, what if my dough doesn't come together? It's like, Laurie, you know how to fix that. But I'm always
Mm-hmm.
worst case scenario. As an attorney, your job is always to anticipate the worst and be prepared for it. So I think that's just my personality. So I'm always trying to expect all the things that could go wrong. But again, at the end of the day, it's just pasta. It's just food. It's just, not saving lives or, you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
I just kind of share what I love doing. It usually comes out in the teaching. So you wouldn't even know I have it when I teach. Once I start teaching, I pretty much don't shut up. I just try to impart as much as I can and show as much as I can in that session. So I always end up leaving feeling pretty happy and pretty fulfilled. So
Awesome.
yeah,
Great. Well, thank you so much for sharing all that, and thanks for coming on the show.
thank you.
Awesome.